pod smashers of the internet, and welcome to another episode of
Pod
Where Gaming Goes to Grab a Beer.
It feels like every time I have a tinking glass, you've got a can. And every time I've got a can, you've got a tinking glass. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's interesting.
Surely can't tink those two in person.
Observable. That's true, yeah. Hi, we are your hosts, Penguin and Termite. And we are Where Gaming Goes to Grab a Beer.
And we are a weekly video game podcast smashing together ideas that you care about with video games.
That's right, we got back on track somehow. But tonight we are talking about it's kind of a genre deep dive, kind of. It's not the same format that we usually follow with our genre deep dives, our series, but we are kind of highlighting two specific similar genres that are more like subgenres or like genre modifiers. It's hard to describe. I'll just go ahead and say then, you probably saw in the title, we're talking about Soulslikes and roguelikes, two similar but also different genres, but they're similar enough that I think we can kind of capture them both in one episode. And who knows, maybe we just split it into two episodes if we find ourselves ranting too long about Soulslikes and decide, we'll save roguelikes for another episode, and then we'll just change things as we need to in the titles, blah, blah, blah. The intention is to get through both genres today, and we've sort of come up with an outline that's a little different from our normal deep dives on genres, and we will get into all of that and more. But first, we are Where Gaming Goes to Grab a Beer, so what are you drinking tonight?
Well, it's mid-December for everyone listening to this, and it is we're in the throngs of the holiday season, and I happened upon this beer while I was shopping for food, and I happened to have Hardywood Bourbon Barrel Gingerbread Stout ready to go, and it's amazing.
Nice. I grabbed some regular GBS because I was probably circle back around this in favorite things, but I was being visited by a buddy this weekend, and he had never had gingerbread stout before. So I introduced it to him, and that was a lot of fun. So anyone who doesn't know what this beer is, it's like the best thing that this brewery does, I think. And then every year they do like special versions of it.
Yep.
And it's just like, gingerbread stout. It's a stout that has like nutmeg and stuff to make it taste like gingerbread, and it's so good.
Yes. Hardywood Gingerbread Stout, described by Beer Advocate as freaking Christmas in a bottle, is an imperial milk stout brewed with vanilla bean, cinnamon, fresh Casamonte Farm, baby ginger, and Bearer Farms wildflower honey. Gingerbread Stout is then matured in Virginia bourbon barrels, where it adapts an incredibly mellow character with notes of oak and caramel, emerging 12 weeks later as Bourbon Barrel GBS. And the little picture is like a gingerbread man soaking in a bourbon barrel, which is hilarious. Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is like, because it's a milk stout, it's very creamy, it's thick, and the vanilla beans are the sweetness, so it's not too sweet, which is awesome, because some gingerbread things can taste like ginger snap cookies. It's like, that's too much. We don't want that. Definitely getting like hints of ginger and honey, like it says, and then of course the bourbon tastes on the back end. It's fantastic. My story is that they have it at Costco, and I was like, I'm buying that. But instead of the giant 21-ounce bottles they had before, these are the little 12-ounce cans. So I got a 4-pack.
Oh, nice. Yeah. That's what I got as well. The 4-pack of those.
Those come in pints though. What you have, and I saw those as well.
Okay. Nice. Awesome. Well, I'm drinking again one of my beers from Total Wine, and this one I got again because when I purchased it, it was like the throngs of fall. All the leaves are changing. It was like peak foliage. So I hadn't even considered that I'd be drinking it in December. So apology if it's not too wintry enough for you. But I got a beer from a brewery called Backcountry. And it's actually, not a beer. It's a cider. And It is a bourbon and citrus cider. So
sounds like an old-fashioned cider.
That's exactly what it is, an old-fashioned cider. And it is, I'm blanking on, so I don't have a description on the bottle, but I do have a description on Untapped. And it's very simple. A couple of sentences says, similar to its namesake, Backcountry tastes like an old-fashioned cocktail. You won't need to build a fire this fall to stay warm. So I'm going to give it a taste. It sounds like everything I like. I like old fashions. I like bourbon, citrus, and cider. So I'm looking forward to giving this a shot. Oh, yeah, that's good. That's real good. Real sweet. And like a little bit of almost like cinnamon. I guess it's the bourbon. And definitely not, it's not boozy enough. That's my only criticism, is it could be more boozy. So especially with bourbon, old fashioned, like I would expect it to be a little bit more boozy than it is.
Oh, yeah.
It's only 6.9% alcohol, but I feel like it would sneak up on you. This doesn't taste like 6.9% alcohol. So, sneaky. If you have too many of them, you probably get drunk, and it would be easier to have too many of them. How about that?
That sounds like fun.
That's my analysis.
Yeah, I will say, I'm drinking this beer out of the bottle because all my beer glasses are packed. And I can't enjoy it like a stout. Like, you're supposed to put this in a cognac glass. And it's supposed to open up and have aroma and, like, an experience. I'm, like, sucking this thing through a baby bottle. Like, it sucks. But it's still delicious. It's just not as good.
All right. Any quick thoughts before we jump on to our next segment?
Yes, I had a funny analogy that I wanted to bounce off of you, and maybe we can discuss it just a tad. It's a quick banter idea here.
Yeah, go for it.
So this whole pandemic, the last 18 months, has now culminated in chip shortages and supply chain problems, worker shortages, the Great Resignation. So everything is like hard to find, and prices are up through the roof.
Inflation, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then notably, what has happened recently, I guess in the last couple of weeks, is like the ships off of the coasts, the harbors that would normally take the cargo ships in and unpack them and put them on trucks and send them out are backed up. And so like on the coasts, we now have hundreds and hundreds of ships like next to trying to get in, trying to offload their gear. And they're all backed up, but there's no workers to like mitigate the issue. They even opened up the ports to like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but it's not really helping because there's not enough people to staff the ports. Mm-hmm. And then like the supply chain is like, luckily it's not as good because if they were producing at the same level they used to, then I guess it'd be worse. But I feel like the analogy I want to bring up is like, I feel like I'm playing a game of SimCity and like everything's on fire and you can't solve anything and you just get to watch your entire city burn. And you're just like, that's it. Like, I can't solve this issue with that, and I can't solve that issue with this. And now it's the holiday season, and you throw a match into the gas chamber and just watch it burn. Because, like, what are we going to do? This is insane.
Yeah, it's an interesting time to be alive, man. And I've been feeling... Oh, gosh, we could... All right. Sorry, no, we're not talking about Soulslike and Roguelike. We're going to talk about the state of the world and our philosophies, philosophical standpoints as to how we're coping with it. But I remember feeling that way for a long time, man. So much feels out of my control, and it's hard. I feel like everybody who's ever lived in a time of upheaval like this, it has felt the same way, right? Like, what can I do? What can we do? How do we fix this? What do we even like? Who and what do we even vote for in order to like make things right? Because at the end of the day, the systems that are in place are so complicated and intentionally like messed with that like even the quote good ones can't do much on like the level that it needs to be done. And I'm like, man, it's hard. I agree. It's so hard to like, and yes, the SimCity analogy is perfect. Like, okay, where do I start?
Yep.
So the conclusion I've come to, and I don't know if this is helpful for anybody out there maybe feeling the same way, is just like be kind and generous to those in your life. Try to make the world better for a few people because that's all you have the capacity for, right? You're not gonna start a violent revolution, a coup that's gonna overthrow the government and remake the world in your image. Like
they tried that.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, you can try it, but I
shouldn't laugh, but people have forgotten January 6th.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, yeah, remember that? Yeah, it didn't work out for them. Probably not going to work out for you, no matter what side of the ideological, tent you sit on. But, so yeah, therefore, just like, and I think I actually had this conversation this weekend on like a much deeper level, but I think the lesson, a conclusion I came to applies, which is like, try to appreciate the beauty, right? Like, we as human beings are the only things in the universe capable of reflecting on and getting meaning out of the universe around us. So do that. Right?
There you go.
And that means, that means like the only, like, yes, we're also the only creatures or the only minds that we know of capable of like solving problems and innovating and making the world better, but we're also the only minds capable of like making the world worse too. So like we have both that. So if you can't like wrap your mind around like how do we make the world better and how do we stop the world from becoming worse, then maybe just focus on how can I appreciate the beauty that is here, right? And reflect on it and let it change me in some way. And you know what that means? Video games, right? Like, I mean, to bring it back to video games, that means like enjoying the stories that people have made and let those stories have a impact on your imagination and your inner life, your inner world, and just let that bring you some measure of peace and joy during a time that is probably hard to get some joy out of. So
yeah, I mean,
you're gonna need that.
You bring up some good points, and what I love about innovation and reflection is that the results of this whole situation will affect everything. So we'll
Yeah.
start to buy things domestically because we can't ship it. Sony
Yep.
is loading PS5s on Boeing jets and shipping them overseas, eating the cost to supply PlayStations for the holidays. You know why they're doing that? Digital sales, not
Yeah.
backed up at a port anywhere. Subscriptions
Exactly.
to
Yep.
PlayStation Plus. Microsoft is Microsoft's stuff is like made in China, but it's an American-based company, so I don't know what their shipping looks like, but they're getting Xboxes in stores as fast as they can. Granted, the chip shortage is kind of what's constraining them, but to get around the docks and the ports. So we're going to see like domestic reuse. Like I read an article about like food waste is now emphasized and being studied in our local college here in Fredericksburg, University of Mary Washington. And there's a whole thing about like expiration dates don't really matter. And it's a marketing tactic to get you to throw away what's left and buy new ones so that you'll buy more. And so like educating and creating awareness of like, no, you shouldn't throw your food away would at least release the strain on the supply chain. And then like used cars and like used games, like used things, used furniture, because it takes so long to get anything. It's like, let's think about how we can, and that by consequence will increase like environmental awareness and great effects for our climate change and like reducing waste and all those things. So it's like all this stuff is so interwoven and cool and fascinating to think about.
Right. If you can take your like emotion and like concern and anxiety and whatever out of it, then it is a really fascinating thing to like observe happen. I find it exhausting sometimes, right? Like exhausting to even think about all of those things you're describing of like buy local and, you know, like reuse and recycle and all that stuff. Like
what used to be a thing.
Sometimes I pull my big boy pants on and I like do that stuff anyways. But what I think what I'm getting at is just like find joy, right? Like find joy and find peace in whatever it is you need to do that. And that's not to say live selfishly, right? Because that is a way of translating what I'm saying. It's just like make your life as comfortable as you can for you. And that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying like do what you need to do to care for yourself and find joy and peace and stability in your own like mental world. And then also use that stability and peace and joy to then be generous and kind and forgiving to others.
Mm-hmm.
And in that way, we will all sort of make the world, I think, a little bit better. Even if it gets a lot of it worse while in the meantime. So cool.
And it used to be like recycling or buying reused or stuff was like a choice. It's like, I'm going to intentionally go do this. I think we're going to end up hitting a point as a society where we have to.
Yeah, probably.
We have to rebuy furniture. We have to rebuy cars. We have to buy or extend our food expiration dates. Like that stuff's just going to have to. Otherwise, we can't afford it. And wage is already another issue and another topic. But like, it's crazy.
Crazy out there.
Yep.
A lot of good changes happening too, right? Like the stuff with the Great Resignation, I think is pretty fascinating. It's a whole topic for another podcast, but I think that a lot of people in our a lot of people in our country and a lot of people in our socioeconomic range, like a lot of people who have been exploited for a long time are finally like saying nope. And I think a lot of change is going to happen. And so, the pandemic has really turned so many things upside down, and a lot of it's scary and intimidating. A lot of it, I think, is going to be really awesome to see. And all of those things and all that societal upheaval and everything is part of our favorite things, or maybe not your favorite thing. I don't know. It doesn't matter because
doing this podcast is our favorite thing.
That's right. Speaking of a little bit of peace, joy, and stability in your life, that is what Favorite Things is all about. It's something that we experienced, sought out, that gave us some interest. Maybe it's just introspection, which brought us to new realizations and new perspectives, or maybe it was just as shallow and enjoyable as just something that we discovered or rediscovered that brought us a moment of happiness, a moment of excitement, and we want to share those things with you, and so that you may be inspired to go out and find those feelings for yourself in your next favorite thing. I guess, I don't know, we both talked a good bit in that little rant, but I'll let you go first because I'm generous and kind.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah, exactly.
Generous and kind?
That's it, me.
So my favorite thing was over the weekend, I was able to support my running buddy Gordon down in Richmond when he was going to run. He did run the Richmond Marathon, and I left Saturday morning to head down there to meet him at the finish line. He has a tradition of going out afterward with whoever's around because we've done this now. He's done this like 8 or 9 times. So we've done this almost yearly at this point. Driving down. Sometimes I drive him down and support him. But this year, because of moving and life and craziness, like it was better for me to take care of the children in the morning so my wife could get some stuff done. And so I just wanted to meet him at the finish line and then go to Legend Brewing in Richmond afterward for a beer and burgers. It was a wonderful experience, wonderful time. I don't really talk about it on the podcast, but I've been sidelined from serious running because of a hamstring injury. I've been seeking help through physical therapy. And so in that time away from the thing I love, which is running. I've not been able to train for marathons. I've not been able to do the long runs. And I've also, because of the pandemic, have not really been around racing and like this. And the entire town of Richmond turns towards the Richmond Marathon. The whole city comes out for support. It's actually like voted by Runner's World as one of the happiest marathons ever. It's amazing. People qualify for Boston. It's a great course. The weather was absolutely perfect and beautiful. Gordon ran the race. He did exactly what he wanted to do. He accomplished all of his goals. And then we went out to Legend and we had a wonderful conversation. I met someone new. It's a running friend of Gordon's that she ran the half marathon of the same day and met us there. And it was all fantastic. It was just really cool. And because that's not at all adjacent to my normal everyday life, it felt so refreshing and like different than the regular stuff that I've been doing. And I got emotional while watching all of the marathoners doing their things. And like, I'm so anxious anxious and eager both to like get back into running. I am getting better. My hamstring is getting better. And so I want to like get back into marathoning. I want to get past this move and like get back into racing. And I'm connecting with the runners. I feel their pain. It's empathetic. It's sympathetic. It's awesome. So all of that was my favorite thing wrapped up in that whole like morning experience that I had. It was kind of I'm getting ready to leave and I'm not going to be able to run with Gordon. We've run together for 8 years plus now. We have done hundreds and hundreds of long runs together. We've raced together 4 or 5 times. My first marathon was with him ever. Like my first ever marathon was with him. And so like there was a great kind of like closure to that loop and that cycle of my life. I'm not going to never run with him again. It's just not going to be nearly as often as it was. And so like that was kind of my hangout with him. In like, not really to say goodbye, but at least to say see you later or see you less frequently in the next couple of years, forever, whenever it happens. So that's my favorite thing.
Awesome. Nice. My favorite thing is this has been a great weekend, right? Like I had hinted at the fact that I got to see my good friend Justin and we played the mess out of some Metroid Dread this weekend, which it's a really close like contender for my favorite thing.
So good.
I told you on Slack, I said that game has reignited at the very least an appreciation for 2D platformers that I have not had since I got an N64, right? Like since I made the jump to 3D gaming, I have like sort of abandoned that entire like genre and style of game. And now I'm sitting here being like, okay, so I'm going to totally continue to play Hollow Knight. I'm definitely going to pick Bloodstained Ritual of the Night back up because like now I've got a taste for it, because at the end of the day it's reminded me that like a good game is a good game no matter what perspective it's in and no matter what controls it has. As long as it feels good to play, it's a good game, and I need to give some more high quality experiences in that genre another shot. So yeah, Metroid Dread has Bloodborne me in this genre as well. So I'm definitely interested more. But that's not my favorite thing. Actually, my favorite thing is I got to hang out with my buddy Termite and a lot of our other friends this weekend to see him off, the sort of Bon Voyage event that I'm ashamed to say he had to put together. In hindsight, our friends and I should have worked to make sure that we sent him off proper without him having to add the additional stress. But things are what they are, and he put together the evening he wanted, and I think you had a good time, and I had a good time as well. We went to a bar that I was surprised to find is not actually a dive bar and is basically just an Applebee's. Like a local Applebee's, and we had 4 Horsemen shots at Termite's request, which was fun.
Yes, we did.
And then we went and we drank beer there, and then we went over to, it was within walking distance of our good friends at Reclaim Arcade, run by an interview we did with Tim Owens. Yep, about when they opened it up during the pandemic. And that was that's always a fun experience. And like the thing about Reclaim that I think is awesome. And so if there's a like takeaway favorite thing, it's if you are in Virginia, you need to make the trip to Reclaim, because it's an awesome, awesome experience. And what they're doing there is unlike any other like arcade that I've ever been to statewide. And if you do live in or near Fredericksburg, you have no excuse. Just go to Reclaim Arcade. And
as much as I would love to think that there are people that listen to our podcast who have no idea like how big Virginia is or where we are located, Fredericksburg is right in the middle between Washington, D.C., which is the national capital, and Richmond, which is the Virginia capital. You can draw a straight line north and south, and Virginia's smack dab in the middle.
Yeah, unless you live in like Roanoke, or like the neck of Panhandle, I think they call it. It's pretty much Fredericksburg is like a 2 to 3 hour drive from anywhere else in Virginia. pretty much.
Exactly.
So
Yep.
anyway, so great place. They've made a lot of changes that seem to, it's funny because I don't think they're serving beer yet, but they've made a lot of changes that probably it's going to end up being one of my favorite beer drinking locations, because they have like a little section on the back end, like outside, where
Brand
it's like
new.
cordoned off, with
Mhm.
benches and fire pits and stuff, so you can
Yep.
like go drink, you can play games, go outside, drink, warm up by the fire, and then go back inside and play more games. It's just, and then they have all those like we talked about in our interview, they have all those like tables and stuff stationed in such a way to like put your drink while you're playing games, so you don't have to spill it on, or you have to worry about spilling it on the game you're playing. So
But they don't have drinks yet. Their
no,
ABC license is like pending.
and that's what was interesting though. So it was fun having all that stuff there, even without having the ability to drink there. So really cool.
And again, with the worker shortage, they have a food truck ready to go. It's installed. It's there. It's outside in this patio area, but it's closed because they have no one to staff it.
Nice, of course.
Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, crazy. So anyways, that is my favorite thing. Reclaim Arcade, check it out, but specifically in the context of being able to see my good friend Termite off.
It was a good time.
So
thanks for showing up. It was great.
Yeah. Anyways, so the next that moves us to our next segment. But real quick, before we do the rap horns, we have been going a little long on some of our episodes, so I'm putting this disclaimer in here that if we have to cut anything, it may end up being DLC, and we apologize. We are working some systems out to try to tighten our episodes up to make Penguin more satisfied with the content itself, and also to be less of a commitment in your fine folks' time. And so if something gets cut, it may be DLC. So I'm putting this disclaimer in here that just in case if it doesn't happen, that's probably what happened, is I probably cut it. But we're hoping to not get to that point. So rap horns. DLC stands for downloadable content. It is a segment of our show where we have a fun mini discussion, a fun gimmicky discussion you maybe wouldn't normally have about video games that may or may not be related to our main topic. I want to fuse our main topic of Soulslikes and roguelikes with the holiday season, given that this is taking place in December. I want to basically ask the question, and I'm going to give a tiny bit of background. I ran into a post on Reddit that I got a lot of joy contributing to, that was basically in my lovely favorite book series, Stormlight Archive, the subreddit there. Someone asked what video games they think the main characters would play, and I contributed my additions. But I noticed a lot of people said that Kaladin would totally play Dark Souls and the Souls-like genres, because it's like punishing and masochism, and Kaladin's depressed and sad and melancholy, and like that is like totally the kind of game that he would feel like he had to play just to beat himself up, punish himself so good. And I kind of agree with that. I think it's amusing, and so I wanted to do that same kind of idea, but we're not going to do Stormlight Archive, obviously. We're going to theme it around Christmas, and I want to basically ask which Christmas characters in the like overall Christmas canon, right? So you've got Rudolph, Frosty, Santa, any of the sort of like common Christmas characters.
Okay.
Which ones do you think would be most likely to play Souls-likes, and which ones do you think would be most likely to play and enjoy roguelikes?
Can I include the Grinch?
Yep, absolutely.
So the Grinch is totally going to play Bloodborne all the time.
Oh yeah.
That's it. Suck all of the joy and color and happiness out of a game, and you have Bloodborne.
You're talking like pre-end of the Grinch, right? Like when Correct. His heart was like 3 sizes too small. Okay,
Yep.
Yeah. See, I was thinking that Krampus would be playing like the Souls games, especially Bloodborne, because he's like a terrifying monster.
Yep. Krampus is learning how to fight by fighting the bosses, and he's just going to mimic the boss moves. The Grinch just like he wants to be devoid of any color and cheer.
Krampus is going to be like, this is a game about how these bosses are being like beaten up by these terrible evil knights, right? He's like sympathizing with the monster good.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So roguelikes, I'm wondering maybe Frosty would find some like,
because he melts and comes back every year.
Because he keeps coming back every year and has to start from scratch. So I think he might like identify with the roguelike.
So would like all of the North Pole, like, because their cycle of just Christmas again. Okay, reindeer, let's deliver presents. Like Rudolph, Santa, Mrs. Claus, like, let's go again and again and again. And so they would be studying roguelikes to learn how to like be better and optimize themselves every year. What can we carry forward from last year to make this year a little better?
That's funny. Yeah, I love it. Great. All right, well, that is DLC. We're finishing up a little early, so I might not have to cut it all.
Yay!
Cool. We want to hear your thoughts, listeners, and you can take any holiday characters or any characters you want from anything. But is there a fictional character out there from any piece of media, even other video games, that you think they would totally, if you after you maybe listen to the episode, if you're not familiar with Soulslikes and roguelikes, you can listen to this and then answer later what characters you think would be totally into those genres based on just the personality characteristics of their character. Termite will share with you where you can share your DLC. Gosh, I cannot talk tonight. DLC thoughts if you have them.
Sounds like all you want for Christmas is your 2 front teeth.
I guess so. I bit my tongue really bad, and so I've got a canker sore, and we ate the last 2 meals I had were chili and pizza, both highly acidic, and it's speaking of exercises and pain, that has been my experience for a bit.
Yikes.
Sorry. Go ahead. Yes.
So, when you want to discuss all things how Solid Snake would celebrate Christmas, you can find Termite, and he will talk to you at 80bitpodsmash.com, 80bitpodsmash.com. It's our landing website where you can find links to all of our social media outlets, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Reddit, and we have a Discord server as well. The link to that is in all of our show notes. You can do all of that. I would love to hear whether you would dress Solid Snake up in Christmas clothes, or if do you think he would just sneak in like the Grinch and outdo him in his stealth and approach to Whoville. However you want to talk about that, let me know. You can also find other RSS feed links as well as podcast platforms at 80bit Podsmash. We are everywhere. Let us know if we're not. We'll put ourselves there just for you. That's about as festive as I'm going to get. So hit us up, 80bitpodsmash.com.
Sweet. All right. So we are talking about 2 separate genres / subgenres of video game tonight. The reason I say subgenre is because pretty much, and maybe even subgenre is not specific enough, because subgenre indicates that you couldn't be able to apply a strategy game, right? And then you've got real-time strategy game. A real-time strategy game is still a strategy game, and it's not like you'd be oh, it's a modifier you could then throw. You couldn't be it's an RTS first-person shooter. I mean, I guess you could. That would be more like a genre mashup. All of this thing, I'm getting off track because all of this has to do with the fact that the idea of genres is highly subjective anyways. So episode over. It's all pointless. Whatever. No, I'm kidding. But my point is it's
action adventure,
a genre modifier, right? Yeah, it could be applied to a lot of other genres. You could have a Souls-like RPG, you could have a Souls-like 2D platformer, and you could have a Souls-like open world RPG, and we have examples of all of those, right? So and then same with roguelikes,
it's like a clarifier. It's
almost, yeah,
it's an adjective. You describe a different genre.
It's hey, here's the main meat of the game might be this, but here are a bunch of similar characteristics that anybody who's familiar with those characteristics would recognize immediately as being like a Souls game, right? Or like a rogue game.
Yep.
And so we're going to get into it. So once again, disclaimer, if we happen to ramble on too long, I've structured this episode in such a way where we could split it into 2 fairly easily. So if we find ourselves in, several minutes in and we're still on talking about Souls-likes alone, then we'll just make this the Souls-like episode, and we'll do sort of a reflective episode, sort of mirror episode to the roguelike aspects in a different episode. So kind of expect that possibility, because we have no idea where it's going to go from here. So, but that's the plan, is we're going to focus on Souls-likes and talk about their defining features and impact and innovations and all that stuff. Then we're going to talk about roguelikes and do the same. And then we're going to kind of break down, compare and contrast the 2, and talk about sort of the similar issues that both of them face, and then some more questions as well. So
there's a little bit of an expecto patronus going on here, and there's a giant elephant with spikes that wants to murder us all in this conversation between Souls-likes and roguelikes, and that is the difficulty conversation versus accessibility. Yes, and I think that should be a different podcast altogether.
It is.
So we're just going to focus on the genres of what Souls-likes are, what roguelikes are, what they've done to the industry and the history of it, and those things, without really touching too much on how punishing and challenging they are, other than
I agree.
They are.
Yep.
That's it.
Exactly. Okay, we'll describe it as that. And this is not so
Otherwise,
much...
we'll be here for 3 nights.
Right. And that's a conversation that's bigger than just the like that's a conversation that doesn't even just only apply to Souls-likes and roguelikes, right?
Right.
So therefore, it is a discussion that should be had at another time, has been had already in our podcast. So we have an episode about it, about difficulty settings. But it is an episode that probably deserves a revisiting because it's such a big conversation. But yes, good. Thank you for calling out the elephant in the room. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that. We're going to celebrate and focus on this genre of game, whether either of us particularly like the challenging aspects or not. So, all right, cool. Well, let's jump into it then.
Mm-hmm.
So starting with Souls-likes, we'll start with the question, what are Souls-likes? What are the defining features that set it apart? And then a little bit of a brief history, like where does it come from? Why do we call it Souls-like? And where did this sort of genre fad start?
Souls-likes are a genre developed by Souls-like, the name comes from the Souls series, Dark Souls, and prior to that was Demon Souls. It's the first one that came out on PlayStation 3 in 2009 from a developer company called From Software. The series creator, Hidetaka Miyazaki, served as the director for all of them, and so there's a common thread across all of these games. Bloodborne is also one, which is why you hear the term like Soulsborne, this is like, these are games all from like one development house that kind of developed a new innovative style of games. And what are they? Definitely action gameplay, super difficulty focused, very precise, and it requires exact timing.
It's sort of, I describe it as like the combat as it's slow, precise, and thoughtful. And not always slow necessarily, the slow kind of, but you know, when you're talking about comparing it to something like a MOBA or Devil May Cry, or, you know, one of those like hack and slash, like it's way more like each move kind of matters. So therefore I say slow. So in comparison to other kind of action games, it's much, much slower. Even first person shooters, it's much, much slower paced, and everything's thoughtful, right? It's almost more, as much as it has to do with skill and timing, it also has to do with strategy and planning. You have to plan and execute your moves correctly, and also plan how you're going to adapt if you run into problems. And it's kind of like waiting around for attacks. Other features are, you know, we can say, oh, they're difficult and they're punishing, but what does that mean? I think breaking down the specific ways in which it's challenging and punishing. Basically, almost all Souls-like feature some kind of like primary currency, something that you use to buy both equipment and level up, and so it's kind of like a mix between experience points and currency. Not always, but that is a common expression of it. And then that currency is usually lost upon death, and sometimes, most times, you know, you have like one chance to recover it. So it like forms a pool on the ground where you die and you have a chance to get it back. But if you fail to get it back a second time, you lose it for good. That's kind of a very common feature in Souls-likes. They often there's this idea of like enemies respawning upon death, and like a limited checkpoint. So you like go back to a checkpoint, and the checkpoints are kind of few and far between. And then the idea is that you have to kind of fight. If you die, you have to kind of fight through what you fought through. They don't just like, they're not just gone for good like they are in other action games. You have to kind of, so it's this idea of kind of replaying through gameplay sections, re-experiencing it through, you know, with a heavy emphasis on death and failure as a way to teach you, instruct you, and make you like sort of challenge you to get better. That's why they're seen as hard, is because they're structured in such a way that is meant to like push you to be better.
So like the lack of whimsical beauty and colors and all those things usually do lead the player down like a path of a sense of dread. So the setting is kind of blended with, I died and I'm frustrated and sad. And so like the player's emotions and the reaction to what's going on and the difficulty of the game, plus the setting and the sounds and the look and feel of the game all blend to create this sort of beautiful melancholy of like cathartic sadness and sucking joy out of you. But like at the same time, I don't know the other side of that because I've never played them, any of them.
Well,
but that's talked about a lot. So I'm talking about it here.
You know, again, they often feature this sort of idea that like you're a lone wanderer, and it's all meant to contribute to this idea that it's a seemingly insurmountable challenge that you know, again, the reward is like overcoming it, right? But everything from like the music, the setting, the feeling, they're all meant to contribute to this idea of like trying to overcome impossible odds, and you the player as the lone person capable of doing that, but also maybe not capable of doing that because it's so daunting sometimes. And then there's other kind of gameplay elements, like they often feature nonlinear layouts with, a heavy emphasis on exploration in order to discover secrets that, make the game easier or make the game, more rewarding. And then also things like asynchronous multiplayer. So things like messages you leave, like they kind of started that idea of like leaving messages for other players and stuff like that. And also you can, almost all of the From Software ones have like markers where if you have online turned on, you'll see places where people died and you can watch their little ghost die, basically, like what killed them. And then also they often feature like you can see other players in the worlds around you, like you see them almost as ghosts, and you're not playing with each other alongside each other, you're just seeing them, and it's sort of meant to make you feel like you're not alone in the experience. Interesting stuff. That's the From Software flavor. Not all of them have that. Not all of the third-party ones have that, but those are common features. Some Souls-likes feature things like invasion-style PvP, where you kind of like use an item and you can go into someone's world under certain conditions and attack them for PvP. They often have RPG elements, and sometimes they have limited co-op as well, where you can like summon someone to help you through a fight. Those are very common, even on third-party ones like Neo and Code Vein have those kinds of features as well, I think. So that's what Souls-like are. Again, as you mentioned, it comes from Hidetaka Miyazaki's masterpiece Demon Souls. We are going to do a developer profile on From Software when Elden Ring comes out in February, and there's some interesting it's a fascinating story. I cannot wait to talk about Hidetaka Miyazaki because he has got a fascinating story, and From Software has a fascinating little history. So there's a little tease there, so we won't get too far into it. But yep, Demon Souls came out. Basically, it was a Sony exclusive. They had, From Software partnered with Sony, and they made Demon Souls, and it was a cult hit, but a critical failure. In fact, I think the president of Sony played the game at the time he played the game, and he was like, "This is garbage. Like, why are we doing this?" And it was a game that was often compared, unfortunately, unfavorably to Skyrim, which came out around the same time. And yeah, it's just very interesting, set off a whole kind of like debate about it. But then they followed it up with Dark Souls, partnering with Bandai Namco. The specific reasons there being that they From Software wanted to take it third party. They wanted to publish it on PC, they wanted to publish it on Xbox, and so they got out of the Sony partnership there and partnered with Bandai Namco instead. And because they couldn't use the IP Demon Souls, they couldn't make Demon Souls 2, they made practically an identical game and gave it a new IP of Dark Souls.
Yep. So, which interesting, Dark Souls 2 was developed not by Miyazaki because Miyazaki went to go work on Bloodborne exclusively for PlayStation. So Dark Souls 2 is actually kind of the black sheep of the group. Like, it's a little bit different.
It's
so
often
Dark Souls
seen
1
as the
and 3
stepchild.
Yeah. Yep.
Souls players like to say Dark Souls 2 is the worst Souls game, but it's still a better game than most games. So, wow. It's the only one I haven't played. So, but take that for a grain of salt. Anyways, it's so that kind of is what started it, though. Like, Dark Souls had much, much better critical success than Demon Souls, and was more widely accepted, and because of that, kicked off an entire genre of games. So, yep, that's kind of the very brief history. Let's really quickly hit on the innovations and impact.
Well, it's when you describe the genre like a Souls-like and what it is, you kind of hit all the innovations that happened in place. Right. And you talk impact. Other developers looked at From Software and the success that they had and like what they brought new to the gaming genres. Like, what new elements can we add to our own games? And so there's a bunch of other games out there in the world: Salt and Sanctuary, Lords of the Fallen, Neo, Remnant from the Ashes, Surge, Code Vein, Mortal Shell. Though those are all like Souls-like games, and then there's elements of Souls-like games that get pulled that aren't exactly Souls-like, and that's like
bigger impact, in my opinion, is like
exactly.
So I played Dark Souls and I was like, oh my gosh, there's like DNA of so many games in here. Like, this is the predecessor to so go on, talk about it.
So if you look at like Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, the combat system in there is definitely pulled out of a Souls game with the precision and the timing, and it can be punishing if you turn the difficulty up. And then the most recent one is Kena, Bridge of Spirits. So like the boss fights are very punishing, and you have to look at the combat
phases, strategies, using all the tools at your disposal. 100%. I go as far as saying things like God of War, right? God of War is, when they talked about God of War's combat, they talked about, they used even that term, thoughtful combat. And I remember, again, God of War was a Devil May Cry clone for the first like 6 games in its franchise, right? Including the PSP ones. And the jump, again, not only was there sort of this tonal story shift in God of War 4, But a often not talked about thing is the fact that it was also this entirely different kind of combat, this third person behind the shoulder, strategic, thoughtful melee combat with an emphasis on timing, skills, and a less number of enemies, but more intimidating single enemies, right? Like more intimidating small groups of enemies, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically, it's got some differences, but it's basically a Souls. Like, they also have the same currency, right? The idea of you don't lose the currency on death, but God of War has the currency that you can either spend on gear or experience, like abilities and stuff. So I'm like, oh yeah. And then Breath of the Wild is another example, in my opinion. I think the combat in Breath of the Wild is a lot more Souls, like has more Souls DNA than not, and then like more than certainly other Zelda titles. And then also the idea of the exploration being something that's not just handed to you on a silver platter. It's not The Witcher where you open up your map and there's question marks all over the place. Like, granted, Souls-likes have not made the jump to open world until Elden Ring, but the idea of just being like, we're going to design the world in such a way where there's a cave over there, and you think to yourself, I wonder if there's something in there. That is right out of... I played Dark Souls again recently, and I was like, oh my gosh, there is like this is Breath of the Wild. You just kind of like stumble across stuff and like go down a path that's interesting, even if it's not the main path. And that's, I think that, again, DNA is there in so many things.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I know.
Agree.
So yeah, basically, I mean, that's basically it. It inspired, not only did it inspire whole new like mechanical gameplay things, a way of thinking about what video games could be and the kinds of challenges they could have, but it also got players. It came out, I mean, Demon Souls and Dark Souls came out at a time where games were objectively just getting easier and easier and more just kind of watered down in what the kinds of challenges they brought. And some argue for the better and some argue for the worse, but it doesn't, we're not having that discussion now. What we're discussing though is like Dark Souls really gave people an appetite for challenge again. It gave people and developers more confidence to be able to design games that were not just choose your difficulty setting and prepare to face roll, right? It gave them the confidence to say, we can actually make games hard again, right? And it wasn't just Demon Souls and Dark Souls that did that. Like, there were still hard games all throughout that time period, but it popularized them again, right? Yep. So I think that overall added to the general kind of types of games we got out there.
It harkens back to like the nostalgia of Nintendo Hard. When like a lot of NES games were super ridiculously difficult, like Ninja Gaiden is just some Castlevania, like even stuff like Metroid's pretty hard if you go back and play that. A lot of games are a lot harder back then than they were, and so when you were comparing games in the generation of like the PS3, Xbox 360 era, where we're just churning out shooters and attacking on multiplayer when it really didn't need to happen, and like PlayStation 3 was experimenting with online passes and all these different monetization things to try and keep players from trading in their games, and like it all seemed like kind of gimmicky and just throwing mechanics at players. And granted, I'm making a broad generalization. There's a million amazing experiences to have. The PS3 and the Xbox 360 generation was absolutely incredible.
But there was definitely this overall sense of feeling of games getting kind of watered down and becoming just like, it's
multiplayer games.
They were becoming more like, well, not just, either. If you wanted a challenge, it had to be multiplayer. You had to throw yourself into the gauntlet of dealing with all the toxicity and bullcrap of other players.
Yep.
And then if you wanted a challenge that didn't involve multiplayer, you're tough out of luck because everything was just kind of getting, even the hard modes were getting easier, right? Like that's kind of the thing that, like, I mean, I still see that now. I'll put the hard mode on games now even, and I'll be like, oh yeah, that's still not nearly as hard as Bloodborne was or whatever. So this idea of like being like, here's a single difficulty experience and like just go forth, right? Go forth and figure it out, I think was kind of revolutionary at its time. For better or for worse, at the time, at the very least, it was impactful and innovative. So whether you like it or not, I think. So cool.
One other innovation that I do want to highlight. You talked about the bonfires and they're like being the save point.
Right.
And I want to read this from Wikipedia because it can articulate the thought way better than I can. So the bonfire concept was similarly praised. Matthew Elliott of Games Radar Plus called bonfires a powerful symbol of relief and a, quote, a meaty cocktail of progress, exhaustion, and joy. And that, while other games evoke emotions with their save points, no other game does so as effectively. Vice called the bonfire a, quote, mark of genius that, quote, reinvented the save point. and allowed the player to reflect on their progress.
Mm-hmm. And
so I remember that, like, you had even spoken that you see the bonfire and there's like, yes, that relief. I'm here. I can save. I'm safe. It's like Resident Evil save room on crack.
So, and then again, like a kind of smaller element that's not in all of them, but was definitely present in the Souls games that inspired the genre, is that sort of idea of, and it's, again, this is not exclusive to Souls games at all, so it's not necessarily a defining element, but what definitely made them really attractive at the beginning was, what do you call it? Environmental storytelling, right? So, like, they really, really, like, a lot of games will have like a very clear narrative and then a environmental storytelling that sort of reinforces that narrative. Dark Souls or Demon Souls and Dark Souls just said, you know what, we're gonna not have a straightforward narrative. We're gonna give you actually very little story at all. You can play through the whole game and not really know what you're doing at all, but we're gonna tell all of this story in the background. It's gonna be through like the few NPCs that there are in the game. They're gonna have dialogue that hints at things and they talk about things a little bit, and we're gonna give like very little cinematics, very little dialogue, and all the story is going to be told in little bits and pieces you find throughout the world. Once again, emphasizing this idea of not holding your hand, not caring if you get the maximum experience out of it. It's like, again, so revolutionary at the time because everything was just so packaged in such a way to like make sure that you got your quote money's worth. And then Demon Souls is like, you know what? Just explore. And what ended up happening was the community banded together around these things. So despite the fact that these games present you with this, you know, lone warrior in this apocalyptic world that has to like make their way through the greatest insurmountable challenges, the games do a lot to make you feel connected to the community. And by their very nature, they encourage you to reach out to the community and find resources and talk about strategies while also simultaneously getting people digging through the lore and having discussions and theories on you know the various online communities. And it's no wonder these games have become viral hits, is because they encourage community, right? They encourage community and don't force it upon you at the same time. It's quite interesting. So, but again, that's mostly the From Software stuff that I'm praising. There's all kinds of, again, all the, you know, it's this whole genre with many of third-party titles that mimic and imitate them, but a lot of those elements are still present. So, all right. Yep, the prophecy has been foretold. We are going to go ahead and split roguelikes into a different episode at a later time.
Yeah.
We have plenty of time slots. We'll hit it up soon. It won't be the next episode, but it will be soon. And we'll do sort of a part 2, and we'll talk about roguelikes following the similar structure. And then in that episode, we'll do the comparison between roguelike, compare and contrast roguelikes and Soulslikes. But we have other questions that we can hit up while still talking about Soulslikes. So I would like to do that. The next question I would have then is, do you think are the pitfalls, downsides, controversies, challenges that this genre faces, in particular Soulslikes? What do you think are, you know, again, why is it so controversial, I guess, is the bottom line. Without getting too far into that controversy, what are the kind of main things that people have trouble with Soulslikes?
Yeah, we have the elephant in the room, the accessibility and difficulty conversation, where we have the masses. So it behooves game developers and publishers and hardware platform makers to like expand their games to as many people as possible. So let's overcome all of the accessibility boundaries. People who have physical disabilities, people with mental disabilities, people with vision or hearing impaired like situations. Let's get our game to them. And the root of that is like, we want to tell a story. We want to convey an atmosphere and a play style, like an experience a player can have, and we want everyone to have this experience. And with that has come some of the best games we've ever played in our life, such as like Horizon Zero Dawn and God of War, as we talk over and over again. Games like Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, and there's a million titles. We can just go on and look at Game of the Year that has won. Like, just look at all that stuff. It's great. And so there's this movement in the industry to like tell single player is not dead. It's not all about the multiplayer monetization tactics and microtransactions and games as a service. Like, the most meaningful games that have come out, the most impactful ones, have been big, long single-player experiences, which the Soulsborne series are. Not all of them, but a lot.
I was going to say Overwatch would be the elephant in that room.
But sure. But then there's there's that ideology of like an experience, a very deep story that's meaningful, and it conveys human emotions in different ways, and it shows interpretations of those things, and you can have an awesome time as a gamer. It's a great time to be alive. Gaming is amazing. And then you have that artistic vision met with difficulty in the Soulsborne genre, where let's not allow accessibility, let's not allow difficulty sliders to some extent. I mean, there are some there, but they look different. And that is the controversy here, because there is a good story buried in these games, but they're gatekept by difficulty, or they're behind a accessibility wall.
Right.
That,
it's like, it doesn't matter how great your game is if, like, X percentage of anybody who picks it up throws their controller halfway across the room after the first hour and a half and doesn't do it. Yeah.
Right. And they just can't get past. Like, I was playing Returnal, which is a roguelike, and we'll talk about that in that episode later. But like that, I hit a difficulty wall in Returnal, and I was like, I'm delusional to think that I'm ever going to beat this game.
Mm-hmm.
And like I was crushed, because like I wanted to hear what happened. I wanted to know what's going on with Celine, and like what the heck was this ship, and like why are we stuck in this loop? And I wanted to know so much more, and that made the frustration all the worse, because like I wanted to experience the rest of the story. So please just give me a difficulty slider so I can turn this thing to easy mode and finish it, so I can get what the artist wrote and like experience the work that got put into it and do that. But that's not a thing, and so that translates into the Dark Soulsborne genre as well. Is like, I want to jump into these games, and different people's lifestyles and different situations. It's exclusive. Like, that's the objective bottom line. Like, the Soulsborne genre is exclusive to the masses. And so it's got a harder barrier of entry. There are fewer people playing it. And that is the controversy. That's the conversation that's happening online. And that's a detriment to the genre, because there's a lot of good things that the genre does evoke, as we talked about earlier in this episode, that also shouldn't be overlooked. And so it's a trade-off here. There's pros and cons of both.
I'm doing my very, very best in this episode to stifle my impulse to defend, stand up for it, because that's not the point of this, right? This question is to highlight. Okay, objectively, Penguin, not to your subjective opinions. Objectively, what is that? I do really, just my only little side note there is I found I think it was Kotaku. I'm not quite sure it was Kotaku, or if it was Polygon, or if it was like IGN. But one of those kind of big publishers in writing about Elden Ring, since that's the thing that has brought the conversation back into the limelight recently.
Right. Yep. The hype of that. Yep.
They did a really good job. I think I love these words they used, because they said, like, sometimes the ideas of accessibility and approachability get combined, and sometimes unfairly, right? And again, when we talk about accessibility, we are saying, let's break down the barriers that literally prevent people from experiencing the game at all, right? Like if you cannot see what's happening on the screen because you're colorblind, and there's so much of the color that you can't see, then you literally can't play the game because you can't see.
Right.
If you can't have a controller that allows you to use the full range of inputs, you literally can't play the game. So that is what accessibility means. Approachability means, like, okay, like, you could have a game that's fully accessible and then completely unapproachable, right? So though granted, Souls games don't necessarily have all of those accessibility features either. That's a different question than, like, okay, what if they had everything that The Last of Us had without maybe the, like, automatic puzzle solving and stuff like that, but everything in regards to, like, all the different, like, visibility features, all the different remappability features, had all those accessibility things, but are still difficult, challenging, and unapproachable. Like, those are, I think it's a good thing to separate those two ideas, but that's not necessarily my point. So if I am being devil's advocate to myself,
the best way to articulate what you're saying here is you take the most disabled gamer, someone who could be legally blind and has, like, physical limitations on what they can do. That individual still has a scale of what's easy and what's difficult.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
given everything that they can't do physically with their life, or their body, and they should still be able to play games, and we should make games accessible to them. But I think what you're saying is, like, the game could still be hard to them, but there are also other games that are still easy to them.
And the thing is, though, again, if we're sometimes I get the feeling that people like to couch this entire controversy. And so, again, why they are controversial is it's easy for people to couch this entire conversation as an issue of ableism, right? And I'm not saying that people say this. What I'm saying is, it seems like the implication sometimes is Souls games are ableist because people who are disabled don't have, like, aren't able to play them and enjoy them, and therefore they'll never beat them, right? The implication is they'll never beat them because, like, the games are ableist. And I don't think that's true. In fact, actually, ironically, I think that is an ableist statement in and of itself, because if, as again, all things being equal, if you have the accessibility features that allow them to actually interact with the game with all of the available inputs and being able to see all of the available information, then in my mind, a skilled gamer that may have disabilities should still be able to beat it. And to say that they can't is the ableist statement, because it's like, yeah, they can. Of course they can, because that's the point. They don't need games to be easy for them. They just need to be able to play them.
Right.
And there are differing levels of skill of people of all abilities and disabilities, right? So I think that's kind of the but again, that's all of that is controversy, right? And like, I feel like most of the people that have this conversation, the vast majority of people that have this conversation are fully abled gamers, right? Like they don't have this problem, right? And so it's like, has anyone actually asked disabled gamers what they feel, like how they feel about this genre? I don't know. Probably. They probably have done it,
definitely.
Right? And
yes.
and maybe the answer is like, yeah, we just don't feel like we can do it. But is that issue because of accessibility, or is that issue because of difficulty? Like, it's complicated, right? Like, and if you were to sit down with a disabled gamer and give them the tools they needed to play the game, like, how far do you think they'd get? They might get farther than you think, right? So it's a really, really interesting. If you take your own subjective opinions out of it, it's an interesting debate, right? And it is an interesting thing. But I will say that, like, there is unfortunately so there is a really supportive community in the Souls community, but there's also members of that community that are extremely toxic because of the nature of the thing. Because at the end of the day, the games are still a challenge, and some people who overcome challenges get it in their head that they're better than those who can't overcome that same challenge. And you have these two words in the Souls-like community. When no matter what Souls-like it is, you're going to find it on every single message board, every single Reddit, every single article, discussion written for and against Souls-likes. You're going to find the two words that have plagued this genre forever, which are get good. G-I-T-G-U-D. And it is this sort of condescending statement where instead of trying to, like, actually teach mechanics to players, actually trying to get alongside other players, and the games are designed in such a way to make players collaborate with one another and cooperate with one another, instead you have two single words which undercut all of that. And that is, well, if you can't do it, you're just not good enough. And I've seen people defend the idea of get good, meaning that, like, no, that is the best advice, right? Like, they have to actually, like, get at it, keep going at it, keep trying and get better. And there's some truth to that. But that's not what I feel like many players use the words to mean. What they mean is, like, if you can't do it, then you're just not good enough. You're just not, and more importantly, if you couldn't do it, you're not as good as me. And they find a smug sense of satisfaction, pride, and it's really, really crappy and toxic. And unfortunately, once again, similar to our discussion about exclusivity, right? Exclusivity in consoles, like console exclusivity. It's the same exact thing, right? It's exclusivity, right? And it's not the game's fault that it's exclusive, but it's the way that the players react to that exclusivity that is toxic and damaging, I think, to the community and of gamers as a whole. That is, I think that's probably the biggest, like, pitfall and downside is the fact, the effect that it has on a very, very specific, loud subsection of the player base. Yeah,
very vocal minority.
Exactly. But it's one of those, again, it's one of those genres that it's like, it's so obvious, because all of these things that we've just said, you've heard, because it is such a discussion in the gaming industry. And for the last decade, since Demon's Souls came out and Dark Souls came out a few years later, like, this has been, like, the games have, honestly, I think the games have gotten more publicity due to the discourse around them than they have through their own marketing campaigns.
Yeah. Sounds like Sega Saturn and Dreamcast.
Yeah, exactly. And that is, yeah, I think it's good for the industry, though, to ask these questions, because it only means we get better, more refined experiences and more experimental things. Because, like, again, if it wasn't for Dark Souls, we wouldn't have gotten God of War, which is, like, kind of a great marriage of the two, right? Like, you do have the easy mode difficulty stuff, but the game's still challenging, interesting, powerful, and meaningful, and also the experience of the combat is bar none in that game, and it's all because it was inspired by the level of precision and detail that went into combat for Dark Souls. So
yeah.
All right. Got a couple more questions that we hopefully have time for. So I think we can answer this next one real quick. Do you think that this genre needs a name change?
No, of course. All of these genres like Castle, Metroidvania, whatever, and Soulsborne like and roguelike eventually like we get there. Yes, they all need their own genres. Like we should not be naming genres based on games people haven't played.
Yes. Like if you find a bunch of games all using another game to describe them, then it probably needs its own genre name. We probably need to, as an interesting. I wish there was like a body, right? Like, because it happens naturally. Like we called first-person shooters Doom clones for the longest time until finally It was like there were enough Doom clones that people were like, okay, like we need another name for this. And like, how did that happen? I don't even know. I guess it just sort of happened organically. People started using the term FPS, first-person shooter, and it happened organically.
Yep.
But like, sometimes I'm like, can there just be like a single person that's like, we're calling them this now?
Right.
But yes, I agree. They need it badly. But the problem is, what is that? What is that single first-person shooter? It's easy. Your perspective is like behind the character's eyes.
Yep.
And you shoot. It's like, okay, easy, awesome.
Difficult action adventure RPG.
I liked the Escapist's Recursive because to me, what defines this genre in many ways is what sets it apart is the whole like repeating sections of the game aspect of it. And
but then you confuse it with roguelikes.
I think it could apply to roguelikes though. So you could take Returnal and Elden Ring, right? And you can say Elden Ring is a recursive open world RPG. And Returnal is a recursive arcade bullet hell third-person shooter, right? Like it's just another one of those like modifiers, just like the third-person versus first-person shooter, real-time versus turn-based strategy, right?
There's a free PS5 game that came out a few months ago on PSN that was called Marquette. It was a puzzle game, and it was actually called Recursive Puzzle Game.
Yeah. So I like this. I like that term because recursive sort of gets the idea across of like repeating sections of the game over again, right? And yeah, that applies to both roguelikes and Soulslikes. So
it's not just repeating, though. It's not like recursion for software engineers. It's like a function that calls itself. And so what happened in the past is what you're passing into the next iteration. So it's like compounding on itself.
Yeah.
And so recursion has more meaning than just like repetition. It's like I've done a whole bunch of stuff as the player. I've gained a bunch of knowledge. Maybe there's an in-game mechanic that carries forward, like Hades when you talked about you get a little bit more health. Is that what it was? Like each time you get God health or something?
Well, that's God mode, but even if you don't have God mode turned on, you still all the like things you unlocked on your weapons carry forward. You do have like a talent tree system in the game where you do get some permanent boosts for every cycle. Even if you don't have God mode turned on, you get points that you can spend towards that you don't lose.
In the Souls games, you have souls that you spend on attributes and gear, right?
Yeah.
That carry forward when you die forever.
Exactly. So you have
that's the recursion loop. It's like the things I have done
and all the
in
checkpoints and the difference between Souls and the big difference we'll get to in more detail between Souls and Rogues, but like spoiler alert, the big difference is that roguelikes have one checkpoint. You start back at the beginning of the game's the only checkpoint. That's not true entirely, but we'll get into the nuance of that later. But with Soulslikes, it's like, no, you actually progress through the game. You unlock checkpoints, and every boss you kill stays dead. The bosses you kill at least stay dead for the most part, right? The only game that I know that I'm aware of that doesn't have that is the actual game Rogue, right? And so and things like Castlevania, right, where it's like you start over from square one every time you die or every time you run out of lives.
And you still like the player's experience is still there unless you erase your memory. Which
exactly,
is
right, touche. Yeah, exactly. So even then, it's like recursive is this idea that like each time you get a little farther and then you go back and then a little farther and then you go back and then a little farther and then you go back. And so I think recursive really does work. Any other thoughts on the name change and what it works? Recursive is not entirely 100%. Any other thoughts on potential name
I don't know
change?
what else to use, but there just needs to be like a combination of adjectives. Recursion can be in that loop, but something else to get away from Soulsborne.
I feel smart when I say things like real-time strategy game or massively multiplayer online role-playing game or
why not?
First-person shooter. I feel smart. They sound like professional words. I feel like an idiot every time I say Metroidvania or Soulslike or Soulsborne, right? Like I've started to feel like an idiot. Like please give me an intellectual A Better word to use than Souls-like. I'm begging you,
Yep.
community. I'm begging you, gaming community. Cool. Well, our last question, then we can probably knock out real quick. How would you personally like to see this genre evolve while still maintaining its identity as this genre?
I want difficulty sliders and accessibility.
Of course you do.
That's what I want. I want to be able to beat a Souls like Dark Souls 1 in 20 hours, 100% platinum done, and move on. Like, yep. And still somehow capture the magic of it being difficult. I don't know how to do that.
Sorry about it. That if you do that, then it's no longer a Souls-like in my mind. But
yeah. And so I don't really know what else I want out of a Souls-like game other than just that.
You haven't experienced enough of them, I think, I'm sorry, I'm not invalidating you, but like I'm not sure you know what makes them magical quite yet, and that's okay. Like, so your opinion is still
I have
valid.
a solution for you.
Yeah.
Keep everything the same, but break up Demon Souls into its own trilogy within itself. So you have like Demon Souls Part 1, Demon Souls Part 2, and Demon Souls Part 3. And each of them have their own platinum, and they can be beaten in 20 hours apiece instead of 60 hours at once.
You are a greedy boy.
And then you don't have to change anything. You can just shrink it. Like, I want smaller experiences in this genre.
You're asking for
Quick.
Solutions for your own self.
That's what makes them so, like, that is like a barrier of entry. That's what makes them so daunting, is they're huge. These big sprawling worlds with these big massive boss fights that take forever, and the
Witcher is
repetition.
huge
and, like,
too. Skyrim, Elder Scrolls 6 is huge too.
But
I don't
the
hear
reason
you
why
saying that you should break up Elder Scrolls 6 into a 3-parter, so that way you can
but
get
they're
more
not
platinums.
Infuriating and super difficult and buried with repetition.
They're infuriating, and they are buried with repetition.
Well, the quests themselves are repetitive, but you don't have to do the side quests. You can go past that and still get the whole story, and you can customize your own experience with The Witcher 3 and Skyrim and Fallout, because I've played Fallout 4 and Fallout 76, and I enjoy them a lot, and they're great. So if you don't want to do all the stuff, don't do the stuff, and you still beat the game.
I don't want to waste time.
Can't do that in Dark Souls.
I don't want to waste time arguing with you because you haven't
But
played
anyway,
a game.
but that's how I want to see the genre evolve. Like, get out of the exclusivity, figure out ways to innovate the series to make it more appealing to all types of people.
They've done that. Do you know what that game is? It's called God of War.
Yeah,
you know what that game is?
You're right.
It's called Jedi Fallen Order. Those are the approachable Souls-like games with difficulty sliders for you.
So do more of that, gaming industry.
I think it's clear to our listeners. I disagree. I think that it's important to. I mean, we should already be getting used to the idea of being flexible with application of the genres, and I think that, like, one person might say, oh yeah, Jedi Fallen Order is a easy Souls-like, right?
Yeah.
And I would look at Jedi Fallen Order and say it's a Star Wars action game with Souls-like elements, right? So I think that being comfortable with the flexibility of that application is a good thing for the gaming industry as a whole. Yes. I think that as far as like Souls-likes go, like experiences that are trying to really nail what the Souls series did, I think that it's important to once again find what those key elements are, and I think some of those key elements are difficulty, challenge, feeling of like both hope, like the dichotomy of hopelessness and unity, like everyone's in this together, encouraging the community. Those things I think are some of the core elements. That recursive aspect of it too, I think, is really good and interesting because it gives people motivation to think of problems and work through their shortcomings as opposed to just dropping the difficulty down when it gets hard. And I like those things. I want to see those things continue to be applied to more types of games, right? Like Remnant and Elden Ring are were experiments in applying Souls-like elements to shooters, third-person shooters in the case of Remnant, and Elden Ring, it's applying those things to open world. Like, okay, what does an open world Souls game look like? And I think that there's a lot of possibility in there's this huge genre that we call action adventure, and there are so many types of experiences in there, and I think all of them could benefit from this design. So I think continuing to expand upon what a Souls-like game could be, it would be my answer, while still maintaining that level of challenge, and the challenge fueling a sense of community and togetherness. Cool, awesome. Well, that is Souls-like and roguelikes. So It's not roguelikes. That's our episode on Soulslikes. Do you agree? Do you disagree with our assessments? It's an ongoing debate, so I expect to hear from players that are on both sides of the fence there. Do you have a favorite Souls-like? Do you think that From Software is the only good Souls-likes and everyone else are just imitators? Or do you love Neo, Code Vein, Remnant? And we want to hear what you love about them, what you hate about them, and or if you've never played them at all and are intrigued by this, or if you are hearing about it and are like, I don't want to touch those games with a 10-foot pole. Those are all valid thoughts. We want to hear them and discuss them with you and more. And Termite will once again remind you where you can share those thoughts.
You can find us at 80bitpodsmash.com, and you can argue with us all day about whether or not Souls-likes are too difficult or too accessible or not, or whether you enjoy the series, whether you enjoy the games, whether you've actually finished any of them. Please let us know. You can find links to all of our social media outlets, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and Reddit, as well as our Discord server in our show notes. And then if you loved the show and you want to continue listening to other episodes and other things going on, you can find a link to all of our podcast outlets. RSS feed is there for your third-party apps, but we have Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Google Play, Apple Podcasts. If you could, please take a few minutes to help us to get some exposure about where we are in the world through giving us a review or writing a little thing about us, giving us a like, a subscribe, a share, whatever it may be on the various flavors of those platforms. Please do that for us to help us out, and that would be wonderful. And we would love to hear from you. 80bitpodsmash.com.
Sweet. All right. Part 2 around roguelikes will be determined at a different date. Unfortunately, it will either be in early December or it will be in late December or early January. So we'll find a time to talk about it. In the meantime, we next week is the release of Halo Infinite's campaign, I guess.
Yep.
So we are going to be doing our Everything Halo episode, which I swear, man, I'm checked and double checked multiple times because I swear we've had a Halo conversation already, but
nope,
we haven't. So
yeah.
We'll do our Everything format and we'll have trivia about Halo and all of that. It's going to be so exciting. So tune in if you are a Halo fan. If you're not a Halo fan, we'll still be talking about video games and interesting stuff about them. So
and big announcement, red alert. This is the week. The next week is when the Game Awards happen. December 9th, Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern. I am going to be on Twitch. Watch along live. Twitch.tv/80bitpodsmash. Subscribe and like to us to be made aware of when we go live. In December 9th, Game Awards. Be there with us, hang out, grab a drink or a food of your choice, and chill while we watch the entire presentation and see to the end who gets Game of the Year 2022. I can't freaking wait. It's going to be awesome. And I'll have another reminder next week at the end of our Halo episode. Please do that. And without further ado, we will see you next week.
See you next week.